I think we'll make a start as we've just got the intro part at the beginning. So hello and welcome everyone to this Sova Middle East bite-sized event. Thank you all for coming. Nice to see some familiar faces again, and also we've got a lot of new people. I think we say this every month, welcome to the new people, but it really is great to see the community here growing. I think we're now on our 9th one of these in the series, so this is great. Today we're going to be talking about AI and assessment, so exploring what this actually means and what it actually is. So we're delighted to be joined by Jarret Hardie, the CTO from Sova in the UK here today, and he's going to be answering all of our questions. So thank you for those who have sent in questions. We've combined them with the questions that we wanted to ask, so we'll go through all of them. This event takes a slightly different format to usual. We really don't have that many slides to go through. It really is a live interview and a discussion as well. So please contribute where you can during and after the session. And then just really from me, just some of my thoughts on this. So obviously we did the well-being and productivity discussion last month. So this was a great view sort of on optimization and productivity. So although they appear polar opposite, actually AI and productivity do have a lot in common with well-being. So it's about incorporating aspects of AI into processes to help drive efficiency. But this obviously needs to be done correctly to help support well-being across organizations. So polar opposite, but actually they come together quite well. So these workshops follow on quite well. So before we properly introduce Jarret, we're just going to go through a brief overview of the agenda, and then onto the introductory slides, and John will continue. So as you know me, I'm a chartered occupational psychologist and have been working here in the Middle East for the last 6 years. Actually, I think it's nearly 7 now, but still working in the UK as well. And then we have John. Do you want to say a quick hello, John?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Jonathan Rook, Director at Sova Middle East. We're into our 3rd year of operation here in Dubai. And chiefly I'm working with clients to digitize and virtualize their assessment process, and really looking forward to the discussion today.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly but not least, we have Jarret. So he is an IT extraordinaire, an all-round expert in the field of AI, assessment and innovation, and really a pioneer in this field. So welcome, Jarret. Do you want to say a few words?
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure I can quite live up to that introduction, but it's wonderful to be here and to talk about this subject today, which I think is one that's certainly near and dear to my heart. So really looking forward to getting into the details.
Okay, great. Thank you. And as I said, we've just got a few slides, then we'll just dive straight into the interview. So I'm going to hand over now to John to do a very, very quick 20 seconds on Sova for those new people who have joined, and then just some slides to place this talk into context. So over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Becky. So I'm really up against the clock here, but just for those of you who've not joined before, Sova Assessment, we are basically an online assessment company, and we're combining the best of assessment science and psychology with some of the latest developments in technology, and specifically the technology surrounding assessment. So everything we do is predictive and based on science, but we're also trying to really increase candidate experience, make things fully virtual for the new world we're living in, and also beginning to bring in some of these AI and machine learning technologies, which we're going to discuss in more detail on this call. We were founded back in 2015. The significant thing that happened for us last year was some investment, which has really enabled us to expand both in terms of our global reach, but also in terms of our technology roadmap, and also our people as well, which is really enabling us to scale rapidly. So lots of exciting things coming towards the end of this year and next year, which we'd be delighted to talk to you more about. And just in terms of the platform, so it's end-to-end integrated. And so what we're talking about is not just psychometrics, but also things like video interview, virtual assessment center, and 360 feedback. And what we really try to focus on, and this is where it's relevant to the discussion today, is some of the predictive analytics and some of the automation and machine learning that we're beginning to bring in ethically into our processes. So just wanted to signpost a couple of things about artificial intelligence before we move into the discussion, which is going to be the really interesting bit. But just to sort of signpost straight away about what we're talking about from a Sova perspective when we talk about artificial intelligence. So there's lots of things we're developing, but the things we've got ready now, which we're working with and we have the capability to deliver, is around the video to text analysis of video interviews. And that enables us to create an automated score for a video interview, which would then be moderated by an assessor. So that's one piece of technology we've got. The second thing is real-time validation, where we can look at the items within a data set or within an assessment and then begin to understand which are actually the most predictive of job performance. And ultimately, as you know, as psychologists and scientists and technologists, that's what we're really interested in, is are the assessments actually predicting something useful in terms of how someone's likely to perform? And what we can do with some of the AI technology we've got is to update the assessment to change the weighting in the mix of items that are predicting something useful to make sure that that test is the most precise it can be. And the other thing is around enhanced scoring algorithms. So this could be related to things like diversity and fairness. So we're able to also amend our algorithms, again, through a feedback loop, and for the machine learning to basically highlight where there might be items which are less predictive or could be causing adverse impacts. But we'll talk through these things a little bit more, but just to signpost that that's what we've got in terms of technology at the moment. Just bringing it back to the UAE quickly, you know, automation, AI, which is part of the fourth industrial revolution, is really topical at the moment. It has been for a few years, even to the point where the government here has an appointment of the fourth industrial revolution ambassador. And so I think in terms of future talent for Dubai and the UAE to become a leading global hub for talent and innovation, the capability to automate and to bring in some of the AI technologies is really key. So I just wanted to signpost that in terms of the vision and what the government are doing here in the region. The one thing that we really focus on from a Sova perspective is making sure that anything we're bringing in terms of automation, AI, is ethical, and that we're not bringing in technology which is unproven. So it's not just about getting slightly better than CV screening. We want to be really accurate with any type of automation we bring in. So that's very much what we're focusing on in terms of our sort of philosophical base when we're talking about AI and machine learning. I probably won't go through all of these case studies, but there's been lots in the press, and specifically some things relating to hiring, where there have been problems in the past. We can share the links to some of these articles later on. But there's been some well-known cases such as the Amazon, basically the CV screening tool, which they were trying to automate. And because it was using historical data, what you actually found was that males were invariably coming out as the more preferable candidates, because the technology industry historically was slightly biased towards male candidates. And so you can see where the problem might come in when algorithms are left to kind of look at historical data and make predictions about what might be most useful. That can cause problems. And so I suppose the key point from these is that if there is bias in the process or the data, the AI or machine learning won't necessarily make that better by itself. It has to be managed by humans, and it has to be programmed and configured in the right way. So I just wanted to highlight that very quickly. So one of the things we're working with, and I know Jarret's probably going to expand a little bit on this, is this idea of feedback loops. So from a selection perspective, and when we're talking about assessment, AI gives us the opportunity to continuously improve and monitor the items or the different assessments that we might have in a solution that we're offering to our clients. So that's really what we're talking about when we're looking at the technology. And just to give you another visual depiction of that, so really it's about enhancing the scoring algorithms. Do we need to weight different aspects of the test slightly differently, or are there other things that we can do with specific items to either remove them or optimize them in order to help with the hiring decisions. And the hiring manager and the feedback loops at perhaps 3 or 6 month intervals could be either of those things, where you're actually beginning to feed in some job performance data from the candidates you hired, can then feed into this data loop, which can become powerful in terms of understanding what is most effective and predictive. Okay, so I think I probably stuck to the time there, Becky.
Yes, you did. Great. Thank you. And I'm sure everyone's probably thinking, okay, well, we need to go back, what is that? And, I think this sort of picture on the slide sort of sums it up. It's complicated. There's a lot to it. And this is why most of us, aren't trained in AI or machine learning. So what we're going to do now is sort of start at the beginning and look a bit at, well, what is machine learning? What is AI? And how is it used in assessment? And what can we all do as practitioners? How can we take little pieces of it to optimize our processes and improve accuracy, and therefore have better results after this? So yeah, let's start the discussions. We're just going to put the questions on the screen. And as I said, we thank you very much for those who contributed and gave us some questions. We've tried to put these together into categories, and yeah, I think we'll just go through each one. If you have any other insights or thoughts as we go through, please do comment. And if you want more information afterwards, we'll be here, and I'm sure Jarret can answer anything else specific to your organisation as well. Okay, so first question then, Jarret. So I think I probably speak for myself and everyone when I say this. Can you explain to us just in real simple terms, what is artificial intelligence and what is machine learning?
It's funny. It seems like it's such a basic question, but there's really no commonly accepted definition. I think particularly when we think about organizations like Google and Apple and Facebook, they define it in whatever way I think is most convenient to their products. Overall, I think artificial intelligence is really, we're talking about technologies that can do things that would otherwise require human intelligence. Visual perception, speech recognition, language translation, things like that. I tend to think really of machine learning as a subset of artificial intelligence. And I consider it to be basically algorithms that can learn from data without relying on specific rules-based programming instructions. So what we're talking about when we think about machine learning and artificial intelligence are technologies that have been given effectively a basic rule set, playbook, and then go on to teach themselves based on the data or the images that they can find.
Okay, thank you. I think that's quite a nice, neat overview of it. So that's good. And I think as we go through as well, we can build upon those points. So can you share with us some interesting examples of AI, or where do we see AI in our everyday lives, or anything new that is of interest?
We see it everywhere. If you do a Google search, there's a lot of AI and machine learning behind that. One of the reasons that Google has become so good at search, for example, is they're using machine learning to understand what's truly on the page or in the content. We see it on Facebook and Instagram. Anytime you're looking at a news story, or, the famous example on Facebook, been searching the website for the new latest water bottle, and suddenly every post on Facebook is about water bottles. We get some more interesting ones, though, I think, when we start looking at sort of the basic devices that we use every day, our mobile phones, our tablets. There is obviously features like face recognition, so it looks across your photo library and automatically identifies all the pictures associated with your spouse. And we even have now the ability in the latest iPhones for the phone to actually recognize text in a photo and make it clickable and copyable and whatnot. So really, I think we see snippets of machine learning and artificial intelligence pretty much anytime we're online, and increasingly I think we will see it out in the real world as well, with self-driving cars and a lot of that kind of technology coming into the mainstream.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, like you say, it's sort of everywhere. It's not just the big things like the driverless cars. It's in everything that we do. I think the other day I was talking to somebody about something and it popped up Facebook. So then you think, are they listening? Can it's the voice recognition, can that then be translated? Okay, so next question then. So what would you say then has been one of the most exciting developments for AI or machine learning in the last 5 years, or what do you foresee for the future?
Yeah, I think we're kind of entering a new phase in machine learning at the moment. If I look back 5 years ago, or maybe even a little bit further beyond that, a lot of the research was focused on the algorithms. So you had data scientists and the computer programmers trying to really figure out the maths behind all of this machine learning, and how they were going to deploy all of these technologies and research to kind of do the learning. And there's still a lot of that going on, of course. I mean, that's never going to stop. We're always improving algorithms and kind of doing research into the next best thing. For me, though, the last 3 years have seen such an improvement in the hardware behind machine learning and artificial intelligence. It kind of, we do everything in the cloud, or have done everything in the cloud. So it's easy to forget that there is an awful lot of computing power behind all of these innovations in machine learning that we're seeing online. In fact, one of the former researchers at Microsoft, Kate Crawford, has published a book called The Atlas of AI, in which she highlights the environmental impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning as more and more data centers are required in order to pump out all of this analysis of the data. What we're seeing increasingly is really, really powerful hardware on your own phone or your own computer that can do all of this machine learning without having to sort of put things out into the cloud. I think if we think about Apple's release last week of their new MacBooks, they have 32 graphics cores in their graphic processors. And that actually is great for video gaming, I'm sure, but actually is more important for machine learning because a lot of the algorithms that have been designed need that kind of very powerful horsepower in order to do their thing. So being able to do that outside of the cloud, being able to do it locally, is really exciting. I think it's going to be quite important for privacy, because you no longer have to send data off to be processed. And I think it's also going to mean that we can start to take advantage of a lot of the exciting research in real time in our own lives without having to be necessarily connected to the internet. So for me, I think the next couple of years, as those advances in hardware continue, we're really going to be able to take advantage of more complicated algorithms. And I think that will increase the accuracy and the just sort of scale of what they can do. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose it's something you don't necessarily think of, the hardware, what's powering it. And interesting, just sort of on that, I read something similar the other day about sustainability, and actually sustainability involves deleting your emails. The more emails you keep, the more storage. So actually, it's not just paper, it's online. And perhaps this is what we need to be thinking. I suppose, does person X need, lots of hardware on their phone? Does person B, what is the priority for most people? I think, to sort of fitting with sustainability. But really interesting. I think we'll all be going around with sort of supercomputers. It'd be crazy to think what we can do next. So great. So how does this then?
I had a question on 3, Becky.
Yeah.
I was just interested to know what Jarret thought about driverless cars, because I've read just recently in The Economist that, I can't remember whether it was Uber or Amazon, but they were saying that they effectively abandoned their search for the driverless cars, or the investment they were making in it, because someone had worked out that to teach a car all the sort of low frequency but highly important tasks or obstacles that might come up against a car when it's driving around, could take millions of years, sort of thing. You'd have to have an automated car driving around for such a long time before it gets to the point where it's taught the AI enough. And I was just sort of comparing it to the human level of skill. I mean, it's an expert skill for a human to do, but it's not like a higher order skill like creativity or intelligence maybe. So I just wondered, in the context of the driverless car, we don't seem to be there. So, how close are we really getting to AI which can match in, human intelligence, if you know what I mean?
That's a really good observation. And you're right, there are a number of companies now getting out of the driverless car projects that they've been engaged in, because I think they're realizing, first of all, that it is really complicated and requires an enormous level of investment. I think there are also definitely regulatory difficulties with driverless cars. So the market for them, if you were to release one, is going to be constrained by that, and might really impact your ability to recoup the investment. But that observation about how you would need millions and millions of years of hours to really properly train the car is a key one, and I think is going to feed into some of the other questions that we're going to talk about. Machine learning requires training. It requires an enormous amount of data in order to come up with the right answer. And I think some things, it's easy to get a pool of data, like facial recognition. You can, if you've got, like Google, access to billions of photos from people's phones, you've got a training set there that you can really work with. But real world training sets are quite difficult. And I think some of the accidents that we've seen from Teslas, for example, in their fully autonomous driving modes, are because they've encountered a situation that they've never encountered before. And machine learning is incredibly bad at that. If there has never been anything like that in its training set, it won't be able to handle that. So I think it's a really interesting observation, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. That's interesting.
I think that links with I think it's the trolley problem or the trolley experiment. It's the ethics behind it, isn't it? Actually, someone's got to program, what do you want the car to do? Do you want it to crash into X or crash into Y? So it's all of these sort of social conundrums that we need to overcome as well. And then you find your rules for the rules. So really interesting. Thank you. So how does this all fit into assessment? So obviously we're talking facial recognition, cars, but how does this fit in with assessment?
Yeah, well, you showed an interesting slide in the initial presentation, John, of some of the headlines of high-profile disasters using machine learning in assessment. I think you've got within assessment, the opportunity for all sorts of interesting, pushing the boundaries technology versus sort of more proven technology, and finding a balance in between. So we've seen, for example, that video recognition, for example, in assessment, trying to teach a computer to evaluate somebody's answer in an interview, tends to privilege white middle-aged men at the expense of everybody else in the world. We're also seeing, of course, obviously, that the assessment of a CV by machine learning, again, also tends to privilege certain groups over others. And I think that's the difference, and that's the key for assessment. There's a lot of good ways that we can use machine learning in assessment to help us operate, in particular, at scale, but also to reduce bias. However, that means that the training must be supervised. So there's two kinds of ways that machine learning algorithms can be trained. One is supervised and one is unsupervised. An example of unsupervised training, for example, there was a group at Caltech in California who wrote a machine learning algorithm that could learn to fly a helicopter without having ever done so before. It was completely unsupervised, and it did eventually figure it out. In the case of those examples we mentioned earlier, where machine learning didn't really work out so well in the assessment space, I think what we're seeing there is the effect of unsupervised training of algorithms in assessment. So I think we are looking in assessment for any particular applications in machine learning that are good at prediction, that are fair and demonstrably so, and that consistently identify high performers and reduce bias. And that kind of steers us into a certain category of tools, which is the ones that John mentioned that we're busy developing at Sova, because those are the tools where effectively the machine learning is helping people, particularly in video interviews. It will help reduce bias by providing a check on what somebody might score, but they are, in our view, algorithms that need to be trained and managed carefully by the psychologists, for example, at Sova, rather than just sort of letting the engineering team loose on the problem.
No, thank you. I think that probably feeds into the next question here. What are the risks that we need to sort of take care of, or challenges?
Yeah, I think, the risks are obviously that you're going to develop a process that is going to unfairly privilege a certain group. And I think as long as you address those risks, rather than doing nothing, you can actually take advantage of a lot of the potential in machine learning. So I think in order to control them, those risks, really the hiring function and the occupational psychology functions are key. They are the guardians of good practice in an organization. And so really this sort of adoption must be led by the people in the organization who today are responsible for maintaining those standards and will continue to be responsible for maintaining those standards in the future. At Sova, we mitigate the risk by kind of having the engineering and psychology functions work very closely together. So anything that we do algorithm-wise is actually designed first by the psychology team and then brought over to the engineering team to kind of be implemented at scale. And we are constantly looking at the results in sort of a feedback loop to identify any particular anomalies or gaps in the answers that the tools are coming up with. So it's a tricky field, but I think the most important thing is to ensure that there is that level of human subject matter expertise, which really stems from the guardians of best practice in the organization.
Yeah, that's great, and good to hear. And I think it's about having a systematic process and way to do it, and having the ethics sort of surrounding this. So what are Sova creating then? If you could just tell us a bit more. So put up on the screen, we've got the video interviews, ML optimization, predictive validity. So what do all these mean, and what does it mean for us practitioners?
Yes. So I think the easiest to understand probably is the analysis of video interviews. We know it's a common problem, particularly in a volume recruitment scenario. If you'd like to use a static pre-recorded video interview response as part of your assessment, you need a lot of people to be on hand in order to listen to, watch, and score those videos. Now that itself introduces a couple of problems, which is an opportunity for us to then bring some machine learning. First, you've got the scale of it, so the number of people that are required. We've got the differences in approach between the different recruiters who are going to be reviewing those videos and the potential for bias. And you've also got the bias that's brought in just by being human and watching a video. You identify things based on gender, accent, age, all sorts of opportunities there to influence either positively or negatively the scores that are given. So what we've been piloting with a number of clients here in the UK is an approach where we extract the audio from the video track and convert it to text, and then use the algorithms that we've created to sort of analyze the response. So we're looking at the content of the response rather than the sort of qualitative frame around it. And that helps us identify sort of the likely best scores and sort of lesser well answered responses, and lets us sort of give a leg up to the recruiters, obviously, by helping them with the sort of the ranking. They'll still ultimately also be scored by a human, but maybe they'll look at the best ones. And of course, we are sort of monitoring that closely to ensure that the results are accurate. What is quite interesting that we've discovered in these pilots actually is the level of bias with certain recruiters. So if we look at the sort of the objective content of the video interview, we then look at how those have been scored in the past. It's very interesting to identify where there has been actually adverse impact when it was only the human touch involved.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. It'll be quite fascinating to see, and I suppose we can all be fearful of the machine or the computer doing something, but actually it's looking at, well, what's the alternative? How good is that?
Yeah, no, that's very much it. We've got I think it's tempting always to look at machine learning and say, well, there's too many risks involved, let's not touch it. But if you do that, you're actually missing some opportunities to kind of remove the risks of not having that, if you like, the risks inherent in our current processes without the assistance of machine learning.
Yeah, no, that's good. So if we were, say, using this in real life once it's released, so is it a case of we'll have candidates ranked, like you say, and just give a suggestion so the client can still decide on who they want to put through or what to do with the data? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we tend to use kind of a training set that's specific to the questions being asked and the roles being asked. And the result is, if you kind of like an automated rank ordering of all of the videos. We don't tend to do it by literally top to bottom. It's by cohort. So this is the highest ranking cohort. We might not actually list the score. We just say these are the ones that you want to look at first, so that there's no explicit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's still, I think, an opportunity for a recruiter to kind of make their own judgment, but without having, I think, a lot of the heavy lifting to do that was there in the past. Yeah,
no, definitely. I mean, you can see straight away how this is going to save time. And it means you can focus on the candidates that, might be suitable for the role rather than those that are not. So, yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, what about then diversity and inclusion?
This is our attempt to basically open up adverse impact analysis to everyone. So the traditional method, of course, obviously is very time consuming and labor intensive, and tends to happen at set moments. So you'll have an analyst sit down and go over the assessment after 500 completions or whatever, do a lot of analysis and identify whether there is any adverse impact on protected groups and the level of that adverse impact. So are we seeing basically, more than 20% of women doing poorly on a particular question, or whatever it might be. The problem with this, obviously, is that it happens manually, so it can take days to do, if not longer. The process of doing this happens at set times, so maybe once a year, if you're lucky, just because of the effort involved. And the effort to correct it, either by changing the weightings or by identifying items that are causing the adverse impact and removing them, requires a lot of effort, and again, only happens once. So what we have put together is software that kind of automates this process and evaluates the D&I in real time. So as candidates are participating in the assessment, we look through and kind of monitor what's going on and kind of showing in real time where you are. So first of all, it provides peace of mind. You know that you are sort of delivering an assessment process that is fair but secondly, it gives you an early opportunity to do something about it if it goes awry, and it's continuous, so it doesn't happen just once a year.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I definitely think being continuous, I mean, that's probably the missing piece in the puzzle.
Yes.
You know,
Just going to turn the lights back on.
That's okay. You lit up as if AI.
Yeah.
No, I think that's the thing. You know, by the time you get around to doing some adverse impact analysis, then you're nearly into the next quarter. Then the updates need to be implemented. So if this is something that clients can do themselves and have more control over, then that will be great. And there's definitely some, you know, in this region, we really are now looking at diversity and inclusion and making sure that we tick all of these boxes. So yeah, that'll definitely be beneficial. And what about the final part, the third thing that you're working on? So the optimization scoring and predictive validity. This is perhaps one of the most important things. You know, we want the right people. We want the best people in the roles.
Yeah. And that's really kind of flows naturally from point 2. So we have a large item bank of obviously questions and items that have been used in assessment. We have a very large pool of completions. I was looking at it just the other day. Although we are, you know, a fairly young company, our platform has seen close to 3 million candidates through it. Using that data, we would, you know, like to actually allow our clients to be able to put together an assessment using our platform that can be predicted to be fair and inclusive. So you don't have to wait for 500 completions in order to kind of get a sense of what the assessment will look like in terms of its D&I outcomes. And this can work in a couple of ways, particularly for organizations that want to put together kind of an assessment and check it, but don't necessarily have the budget for every single role that they're recruiting to go to the full kind of analysis. The other, and I think more exciting and ambitious aim, is to be able to effectively put in a job title and a level and have our system automatically configure a recommended assessment based on the items. So the tool that we're currently developing would allow you to specify the industry, the role, the seniority, you know, certain assessments that you either want, assessment tools that you either want to use or not use. For example, you don't want to use logical reasoning, or you absolutely must use a static video interview. And then assemble an assessment that would be good at predicting what good looks like in that role, that can then later be kind of adjusted. So this kind of takes the heavy lifting out of the initial stage, and means that, you know, the expertise of the practitioner really is put to the best use to kind of put in the 20% at the on top that is really where you need an expert.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And you can again see how this will create great efficiencies. And, you know, it's about giving people something to start on, you know, something to build upon. So giving a suggested template, recommending, and then perfecting it from there. So yeah, that's great. And when I'm not going to ask you timelines exactly, but when can we start using some of these things? Or if anyone's interested to use some of them, you know, how can they?
Yeah, so the first one, like I said, we have been piloting with some clients in the UK, and I think that will probably be ready for kind of wider distribution at the end of this year, beginning of the new year. And so if anybody on this crowdcast would really like to talk to us about that, I'd be very keen to sort of hear from you and perhaps include you in some of our pilot studies. The next two items obviously are the subject of some very significant research on our side, and we are expecting that, I think, to come to fruition in early 2022.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think I'm conscious of my own time now, and I'm the one going over. So question 7. So I suppose we've sort of touched on the 3 there. Anything else that you're currently working on, or anything else exciting for the future that we should keep our eyes on?
Yeah, there are, I think, some interesting opportunities to take machine learning and again, bring more efficiency to the process. One of the things that we're just beginning to look into is how we could use machine learning to kind of help map competency frameworks for some of our organizations that have a framework across sort of the entire enterprise at various different levels, and how we would be able to help map those and the weightings and all that kind of stuff to Sova item banks, and also including some of our enterprise clients' items as well. Just in the early stages of that, but I think that kind of follows on the theme of the efficiency that we're trying to gain from machine learning.
Yeah, definitely, and I think this is something we see in this region a lot. Having somewhere where you can go online, choose your competencies, the assessments pulled together, and the output comes against the competencies would again save lots of time and help create a more efficient process. So we'll keep an eye out for that. We'll have you back on to talk about that, and that's launched. And then finally, I suppose, what advice do you have for clients? How can they get started? What can they do?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice I have is don't be afraid of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So look for partners who want to use the tools ethically. Look for partners who have done the research to identify which aspects of machine learning can be implemented safely and which can't. And within that, effectively be the guardians of good practice in your organization. Be clear about the outcomes you want from machine learning, the problems that you want it to solve, and be demanding about it, frankly, to ensure that it fits and works well. I think combining assessment science and technology will give us the biggest wins, and that's kind of the approach that we do here at Sova for everything. It's the expertise in psychology combined with the expertise in technology, and I would say if we take that approach, be excited, but innovate responsibly.
Thank you. I think that's excellent advice. Really good tips there. Any other follow-up questions, John?
No, I think that's really well explained in terms of the the difference between AI and machine learning, because there's there are some distinctions there, and there's a sort of higher order bit of AI which is distinctly different to machine learning. Like you say, that the machine learning is particularly where we can create some of the efficiencies in assessment. And just a really good review of our tools in terms of what we've currently got. And some of the sort of exciting things that we're going to begin to see later this year and early next year. So as Jarret said, we'd love to have further conversations about this, and thinking about where clients are from a maturity perspective and having realistic expectations as well. Someone said to me the other day, I want this AI enabled, and so I asked, well, what do you mean by that? We want the AI to sort of scan all the candidates when they're completing tests and give us red flags based on what they might be doing from a facial expression perspective, or where they're specifically looking on the screen, to check that they're not somehow maybe using their phone to Google the answer or something like that. But so that there's the real world, and then there's sort of where we might be in sort of 20 years time, which is not at the moment. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting ask. I think that kind of proctoring effectively using AI would be very difficult, given the tools that we've seen in the world and how they operate or really fail to operate on people from diverse backgrounds. Would probably be an example of the use of AI in assessment that would have to be, I think, carefully scrutinized.
Yeah.
No, thank you. That was really interesting. Learned a lot, and I think as well the theme you were saying about sort of governing your own processes and not taking away from the practitioners, the psychologists. All of these things are really important. So excellent, so great. And I did just have a think a couple of final slides to finish. If everyone could just bear with me 30 seconds. We don't have to put them back on. I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions, please do write in. Contact us afterwards, or if you want to speak with Jarret further, if you don't mind, Jarret, we can pass on any questions to you. If anyone wants to start trialing some of this new technology, again, let us know. And then just to remind you, as we always say, if anyone would like system demo, more info, let us know. And then our next event's coming up. So November, we are now talking about the talent shortage, and December spends for 2022. So we'll definitely take some of the things that Jarret's been talking about into account here. And then finally, please do join our community. I know lots of you have already. This is a great way to access and share information, and just to be around like-minded individuals, to get ideas. And it just means everything is in one place, so you don't need to download documents or videos or so on. You can just literally log in and have everything at your disposal. And just to say as well, our events are actually being put onto another platform where you can then go in, choose on demand to download different talks that you like. So we'll give you access to that once that's ready as well. And yeah, just to say thank you again for listening. And if anyone has any questions now, please let us know, or afterwards let us know too. But thank you. Yeah, any final words from you, John or Jarret?
No, just thanks a lot for joining. I'm sorry, I came out of the presentation. I was just checking if there were any questions from the audience, but feel free to follow up with us, as Becky said, and sign up to the community, join the events, and we'd obviously be delighted to speak to you more specifically about your needs if that's of interest.
Yeah, and if
thank
you have any... Sorry, Jarret.
I was just going to say thanks for having me. It's been lovely to speak with you about it.
Thank you. And if anyone has any other ideas for topics, anything at all you want us to cover or go into detail on, let us know. And I think from popular demand from last month, we are going to do a follow-up session to wellbeing and productivity at work, because there were lots of questions about, well, can we have some strategies to enhance our wellbeing and so on. So we'll definitely do something on that. But any other topics, let us know. And we'll definitely have you back again, Jarret.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jarret.
Thanks. Have a lovely afternoon.
Enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Bye-bye.